I'm Simon Lipson, and this is Nice One Cyril. And yes, we clobbered West Ham, as we all predicted last week. 3 wins, third in the table, and we're playing well. What could possibly go wrong? With me today, as ever, are Spurs royalty, Julie Welch, poet, philosopher, and Gales hater, Kevin Acott, and a man I used to sit nearby 40 years ago, all-round Spurs nut, Alan Fitter. We'll chat about the West Ham match. We'll also look into the phenomenon of players we loved, notwithstanding that they were a bit crap. Julie had a little chat with Spurs legend Steve Perryman today, right? She's our own legend. And he gave her some insight into the lovably useless John Pratt. We ran a poll on X asking how long our fans would give Xavi Simons to prove he isn't a waste of money. Almost half of you said 25 minutes. So how did he do? Nostalgia, therapy, and the odd rant to come. And we'll finish with our predictions for Villarreal and Brighton. Strap in. It's Nice One Cyril. Nice One Cyril. So, welcome to Nice One Cyril. We've got a lot to get through today. Why don't we start with our hammering of the hammers? I'm going to introduce a new boy. He's not that young, but he's new.
No, it's not young.
Now, this is Alan Fitter, and just quickly to explain to our listeners, Alan and I used to sit next to or close to each other, depending if there was a spare seat, about 40 years ago in the old West Stand. And Alan doesn't know this, but I called him privately to my friends, Noel, right? And that's because he knew everything, right? And I say something like, Gilzine should have passed that. And he'd go, no, he couldn't pass that because Chivers wasn't in the right position. And I'd say, oh, yeah, well, Alan knows. He knows everything. He's a Noel. But it was said affectionately. Anyway, Alan, knowing everything as you do, tell us a bit about your thoughts on that West Ham match.
It was interesting. I'm sure we'll agree. The first 25 minutes, I was sitting. It's a terrible old cliche. This is not one for the neutrals. It was very poor football. We weren't quite doing it. They weren't quite doing it. I've never been to a football match at that stadium, but it's a terrible stadium. And I think the West Ham supporters are suffering. Not that I care that West Ham supporters are suffering, except one of my son-in-laws is a West Ham fan. So I was quite pleased.
That's never good. Never good.
And then there was, of course, the disallowed goal, which I think had nothing to do with VAR because it was a terrible decision by the referee.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you now, and I know you discussed it, I think VAR is the worst thing that's ever happened to football. And if it was me, it should be abolished completely. And we'll get back to referees make mistakes, players make mistakes, managers make mistakes, human beings make mistakes. VAR is not supposed to make mistakes. But the good thing is, if there is a good thing, they've been told it's only howlers now, which it should have been in the beginning. That wasn't a howler. It was a bad mistake by a referee with a congested penalty area. And it should have been a goal, and we should have had a penalty. So,
yeah, I mean, I think the considered view is that, the referee only saw what he perceived to be a push by Van de Ven. So at that point, that's all they could review, right? Because we all saw the fact that he got pushed first and then he got pushed into, was it Kyle Walker-Peters? So it wasn't a great decision, and we should have had a penalty shortly after that when, for some reason, the referee allowed some wrestling to go on in the penalty area. Kev, interesting selection, wasn't it? We had no centre forward, because I don't regard Tell as a centre forward. We had Palhinha, but not with Bentancur this time, but the rather brilliant young Bergvall. What did you make of that selection before the match? Did you think it was the right one?
Before the match, I mean, I don't like the amount of rubbish that's thrown Tell's way. I feel really sorry for him. But before the match, I didn't think he should start. I was slightly surprised by that. I was guessing because he's left out the Champions League squad, isn't he? Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing there was a little bit of sort of thinking ahead going on there. But I think we were weak. We were weak those first. I agree totally. The first 25 minutes, and I just thought, oh God. But I was underestimating just how bad West Ham are, I think.
Mm.
The sending off obviously made some difference, but we still would have won. They were poor.
They were vapid, weren't they? They're nothing to offer. But they've got one good player, in my opinion, that's Bowen. And beyond that, they're very, very ordinary. Julie, it was interesting. Apparently, selecting Tell wasn't a shock to him having missed out on the Champions League, but it was the fact that Richie was been travelling halfway around the world during the week, and Moani wasn't quite ready. I hate the idea of having a go at Tell, but I've yet to see a great deal in him to warrant making the purchase, albeit fairly cheaply, during the window. What are your thoughts on Tell?
Well, first, I liked the look of him when he arrived on loan last season because he was very eager, very committed. I think there is a player there. He scored twice in a recent under-21 international, so he's not crap. On the other hand, he's quite a little guy, isn't he? So what he was doing as a centre forward, I'm not quite sure.
No.
Because really, if you're centre forward, even if you're not a brick shithouse, you've got to be quite a big bloke, I think, especially against a side like West Ham. But I hate all this sort of stuff that's coming his way because, as I say, I think there is a player there.
Mm.
I can sort of move on from that to a signing, which I think is probably the most significant, Palhinha. The difference he makes is fantastic. It means that somebody like Romero is now free to do a bit more Romero stuff. That pass, upfield to Villarreal was absolutely fantastic. God, it was great.
It's
and
a
I thought,
beautiful ball.
Yeah. And, we've been crying out for that sort of skill and world-class input since Harry Kane left, basically. So, Palhinha, for me, is the great signing.
I think that's a very astute observation because I've got very frustrated with Romero in the past for standing on the ball and doing nothing. He's looking and looking and looking for options and nothing. And I think it's because he doesn't want to risk playing the ball, which he's perfectly capable. He can break the lines with the ball, and as we saw. And as you say, now we have Palhinha there to fill all the gaps. He's one of those players you don't really notice until you look at the stats and you think, fucking hell, he's been everywhere and he's blocked everything and he's intercepted everything. I mean, he's a remarkable signing. We ought to have it's an interesting forward line because they've never played together before. We had either side of Tell, we had our man Kudus and our new boy Alan. Did he get past the 25-minute mark for you without you saying he's shit?
I have to say I'm one of the few eternal optimists. I always think Spurs are going to win, apart from when we play that team from Woolwich, but that's another story. And I always want our signings to be the best ever, apart from a few we may discuss later, but that's another story. No, I thought he did very well. I'm not sure if it's his best position. Having said that, I'm not sure, looking at what Frank has done in, 4 or 5 games, is he's going to play a number 10 as we think is a number 10, i.e. a Madison. I think he likes these strong runners, like Sarr and Berryvale, if we're going to call him Berryvale. I think he likes that. And I think for the time being, I might be proved wrong because I think he's very flexible, which is the beauty of Frank, is that he will play Xavi out on the left a bit and then bring him in, let him come in and get involved that way. As I say, from what I've seen so far, I think he's going to play these stronger, these all like Berryvale. We don't know if he's going to end up as a number 8, number 6, number 10. He's all those things. Same with Sarr. And with Palhinha, he's best. And I think he's a wonderful player. He's one of those players I wish we'd have got 5 or 6 years ago, but we didn't. And so I think, yes, I was impressed for what we saw in 90 minutes. I was impressed with Xavi, to answer your question.
Julie, you had a thought on that?
Just a thought. At last, we've got somebody who can take a corner kick.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we're not missing Ericsson too much, are we? And that's for sure. Yeah, there's some lovely on both sides actually. Kudus and Simons seem to be able to swerve it in with pace and danger.
On the subject of that,
Alan, go on.
So I was just going to say on the subject of that corner, and something I noticed because I rewatched the highlights on Spurs play this morning is when he gets that goal. Obviously, there's been a lot of corners in the first half, a lot of movement. When he gets that goal, Sar looks over to the bench, and Frank, I don't know the name of the guy who's now our set piece coach, and I think they talked about that at half time, and I think that was a really the things we love to, we love off the cuff. I love off the cuff. We all love, I think. If you're a Spurs supporter, you love off the cuff. But I also love it when there's a bit of planning and a bit of thought and, and stuff that we haven't thought about for the last few seasons.
I mean, that's interesting. And I think you're so right. I mean, it does seem, Kev, doesn't it, that with Frank and this huge team of coaches and assistants and data guys and all the rest of it, that we've acquired a guy who is tactically nimble. He's watching stuff. He's not just saying, look, let's all pile forward a la Ange. It's quite refreshing, isn't it?
It is. And I think the more I see of the Frank team, the more I'm doubting, rather belatedly, Ange, if that makes sense. I think no one ever described as tactically nimble, I know. But I think Frank feels like the real deal. There's obviously there's hope there, and he's good at instilling hope, and he's good at instilling something very positive in the players. But he adjusts, he's flexible, he thinks things through. He doesn't do the same thing. If it's not working, he'll try something different. He'll do something different with each match, and I think that's so impressive. You'd think it should be basic in a way for a good manager, I guess, those things. But I think at the moment I feel really, really positive. Obviously, I'll turn on him, in the middle of November. Start the Frank out.
Cool. I'm going earlier than that, don't you worry. But it does seem, Julie, he does seem like a guy, not only does he seem to have a good grasp of tactics and he's flexible, he looks like a good man manager as well.
Yeah, I think that's important. Although I will say, I thought, why Ange got away with it for quite a long time was that Ange was a good man manager.
Mm-hmm.
And he did instill he was a rabble rouser. He instilled some sort of belief. I think that Thomas Frank is just different kind of bloke, isn't he? He's very on the ball, literally. I feel a lot more confident watching a Thomas Frank lineup than I ever did watching Ange. I'm beginning to lose that little sort of edgy feeling of dread. Although, against Bournemouth, if I can mention, I did think, here we go, the early goal. So the jury is still a bit out for me, but yeah, he seems a lovely bloke. He knows what he's doing. He's tactically sophisticated. I think Irreverent is probably more tactically sophisticated, even more tactically sophisticated. But as I say, the jury's still out. He's probably quite a relaxing guy to be with, but he's obviously got an authority. The stuff with Zuma, for instance, he, as Steve Perryman would say, he don't take no shit thing.
Yeah. Let's have a quick word. Alan, I love Villarreal. I think he's not just promise anymore. He's a kid who can really play. He can run with the ball. He's got his movement's great. He's strong. He's combative. He doesn't score enough goals, of course, when I think he's well capable of doing that. I think he's a starter. If you're talking about your first 11, for me, he's a starter. And then it's up to Frank as to whether we have Bentancur or Pavlyuchenko. At the moment, it looks like Pavlyuchenko, and the rest kind of fall in around that. What's your feeling? Is he too young to kind of saddle with that much responsibility?
Well, Julie, was it Billy Nick? No, well, it probably wasn't Bill Nick. He said a lot of things. If they're good enough, they're young enough, or the other way around, whichever way it goes. I think personally, and getting back to what Julie said, the jury's out. I think it's early days. I think we have to remember it's 4 games. Forget the Super Cup. It's 4 games, and it's got to be over a longer period than that we make our judgments. It's how we do when we're behind. Now, against Bournemouth, which is the only blip, and the only game I've been to see, so it must be my fault. I think if Villarreal had started, I think we'd have won that game because he adds that dynamism. He moves the ball forward either by dribbling or by passing. He was involved in the third goal, of course. I think he's a star, and I think if Frank is brave enough to start him often enough, I think he'll be rewarded. he's still got. Listen, we don't see all what's done in training. We don't see all this data that they get with with their monitors that they have on all the time. So he's still a very young man. I'm not even sure if he's 20 yet. He may just be 20.
No, he's 19.
He'll be managed, but I think he's I'm not going to put him up in the highest pantheon yet because he's 19, but I think he's got so much going for him.
And also the other player who's just absolutely sort of taken a quantum leap this year, this season, Kev, is Pat Matissar. He looks like a different player. I always thought he's that kind of player. You think, he's a good runner. He's athletic, gets around the pitch, makes a few tackles, gets the odd goal, but he just looks like a different player this season. Is that down to Frank?
I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing at least some of it's down to Frank. I mean, I wasn't convinced. I haven't been convinced by him at all until this season. If someone had told me, he was transferred in the summer, then I'd have gone, oh, okay. It wouldn't have bothered me. It's shown bits and pieces of a much better player. He's really starting this year, I think, to this season to show more and more, and he's looked really good.
Yeah,
I don't know if he's playing in a slightly different team in a different setup, and that might be suiting him a little bit better. But he just looks, everything about him is happier, more cheerful, more involved, more energetic, I think, as well. And he's potentially a very good player, I think.
He is. We also saw, Julie, the Spence, our newly capped Spence, back in at left back. And I think Udogie is pretty fit now. And Udogie came on and replaced him. Been some talk about, you can't possibly drop Spence, but we get better balance with Udogie out on the left because he's left-footed. Is it the case that Spence has to go back into the shadows and cover both full-back spots, or is he more of a challenge perhaps for Porro?
I think all I can say about that, bearing in mind that I think all three are very, very good players, is that we've got a lot of games coming up. At last, we've got strength in depth around that particular area, which is really good. It did cross my mind at one stage that when, now that Spence has started to really kind of do his stuff at last, that maybe it's the end for Udogie. But I don't think I think that's just me being pessimistic. I think if anybody would be in danger, it would be Pedro Porro, who has, I think, been there longest. I mean, he's a smashing player, so I wouldn't like to see him go. That's my take on it. We've now got three players, so that if the injury strikes, we're covered.
Kev, you had a point to make?
Yeah, it's just something I was thinking about watching the West Ham match. One of the things Frank is doing, or has done, I think, is do two things that have always annoyed me about Arsenal and Arteta, which is the sort of the wrestling during corners, to make corners incredibly difficult for the opposition, and long throws. And I hate them when Arsenal do it. I hate it when any does, but that's given us so much more. And I think that's the pragmatism, I think, that I think we're really going to benefit from. I really enjoy that.
I wonder if, that the idea of the long throw sort of come back into fashion a bit. And it's interesting because I think there's a sense, isn't there, that we don't do that. That's old fashioned. That's, Ian Hutchinson, Chelsea, 1970. We don't do that kind of thing now. It's not sophisticated. And yet now we're doing it. We're going long much more often than we did before. We don't have to do the harem scarum playing out from the back. And as you say, it's a pragmatic approach. And I think it also plays to our strengths. We've got a guy up there, Kudus. For me, you play a ball up to him, he's going to hold it. He's got the skill, he's got the strength, power to hold it up and bring other people in. I think when Solanke's back, that we double that skill up. Alan?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Julie will appreciate this. I think we invented the long throw. I think Dave Mackay invented the long throw back in 1962. And there's always the wonderful photos and of course everything was incredibly muddy. And Dave Mackay used to do this. And not long after him, Martin Chivers had the great throw too. So I think was it Delap of Southampton who made it, and it was a thing. You went, long throw. I don't watch a lot of football outside of Spurs, but I was watching bits of Match of the Day, and as you say, I think it's come back into fashion. And I think every team now is can have a long throw match, and we won't all go, it's a terrible way. I think it's another way of getting the ball into the box.
Now, well, I think we've done the West Ham match to death, and that's lots of interesting chat there. A quick word about Ange. He started, bless him, at Nottingham Forest. He's instantly turned Morgan Gibbs-White into a donkey. I mean, it's much too early to make any predictions, but to me, this is, Kev, it's a marriage made in hell. Him and Marinakis. I mean, it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, and a good friend of mine's a Forest fan, and I find myself sort of apologising, like it's somehow my fault. But I think it's not going to work, is it? I mean, I'm not quite sure who's going to work with their chairman, to be honest. But Ange and him are going to have a fallout before Christmas. Guess he might make it through the season, but not beyond that. I don't think. They're not.
No, I think you're right.
Because I think the way they play has been incredibly pragmatic. You know, last year their success was down to pragmatism and being relatively solid and sensible. And I don't think Ange is bringing that to them.
I think we all like Ange, don't we, on a personal level, even if we regarded him as flawed as a manager. I'd hate this to end messily, but I'm sure it will. Julie, just one thing, we talked very briefly last week about Mikey Moore, and the reason I raise it is because I've got very high hopes, or I had very high hopes for Mikey Moore. He did some brilliant stuff now and again last season for us. He's over at Rangers now. I went on to some of the Rangers Twitter and they hate him. Go back to bloody Spurs, you twat, that kind of stuff. They loathe him. They think that, they think he's the worst thing they've ever seen. Why is he saying he wants to be the best player in the world when he's so shit? Is this a case of a kid who's going to end up at Colchester United, or do you think this is just a bad loan for him?
It's interesting you should bring that up. Must be telepathy, because I was thinking about Mikey Moore today when I was reading about Rangers' shit start to the season and wondering why the hell they let Mikey Moore go to Rangers, which is a very, very hard place to go. And, he's only a boy. I then thought, well, it took Harry Kane a long time to become Harry Kane, didn't it? I hate the idea that this is a guy who's going to end up at, as you say, Rushden and Diamonds or Wycombe Wanderers, something like that, when he promised so much. Maybe they just need to find him a less challenging loan. I think it was a mistake to let him go there, because it is a very, very difficult environment for even a mature player.
It is. I think also he didn't quite return to the player he was post-virus, this mystery virus he had. He was brilliant, or showing signs of brilliance before that, and then after he looked as though he'd lost a yard and lost a bit of confidence and so on. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on the Mikey Moore situation. Now then, this week, Nice One Cyril on X ran a poll, and we were essentially asking for your favourite useless players. In other words, players you really liked, but you recognise their limitations. Top of that poll, not surprisingly, Eric Lamela. He got 51%. Now, for me, I was never a Lamela fan. I don't think people who don't ever create or score goals and who try and dribble out of their own penalty area with a minute to go in a Champions League semi-final, they are not my favourite kind of players. But I know he's popular. He's a shithouser, and he did 2 Rabonnas in 6 years, and, bless him. Then we had Sissoko, Højbjerg and Royal, who came after that, sort of in fairly equal proportions. Ev, your favourite useless player, who would that be?
My favourite, I don't want to use the word useless about Stefan Freund.
Okay.
Because one thing, I was thinking about him today, and I was thinking he played for Germany as well. So how did everyone get it wrong? The thing is, Freund he came across as a good guy. There was something about him. And he came across as really, really caring and really, really committed. And it was almost like he'd spent his whole life making up for the fact that he wasn't a great player. The fact that he never scored. He never scored for us. I think towards the end he was deliberately trying not to score, just to sort of set that record. But I didn't object to him playing for us, if that makes sense. I don't think he was so useless that he didn't do a job. He was like a sort of Paulinho without most of the good bits. I just really liked him. He also, of course, was in the team that actually won a trophy, the '99 League Cup, which not many players that we've seen can claim. So, yeah.
He also did that thing, didn't he, where he kind of ingratiated himself by with the fans by looking so desperate to do well, and he was the original, badge kisser and chest thumper, wasn't he? That's what he did, and so you couldn't help but like him for that superficial commitment. Julie, you got somebody in mind?
Well, I did a bit of research, but I've been rummaging around in footballers' brains lately for various other reasons. And I just thought that if I'm going to talk about useless players, I need to put that in perspective, and just to prove that we are a lot more useless even than the useless ones. There is a research study which shows that executive function can help predict the success of footballers. And executive function is all the stuff we associate with cleverness, which is planning, organising, managing situations, memory. And researchers compared elite players with lower division players and found that both groups had significantly better measures of executive function than the average member of the public. So there is that. And there is also the fact that 50% of us are capable of going to university, but only 1% of us will ever succeed in a career at professional football, of which and in that 1%, only a much, much smaller percentage will ever make it into the top tier. So useless is a bit relative. Having said that, I would just like to talk about John Pratt. I mean, it's a terribly unfortunate name for a footballer to have when he, isn't the sort of finest exponent of the art. And the whole thing about Pratt is that actually he could see the game, he could read the game, he could see as far as Glenn Hoddle could see. But the trouble was that there was nothing, when he got to the end of seeing, there was nothing, he just couldn't deliver it. Which is really bad, because, he was sort of 90% wonderful and brilliant, and 10% crap. And unfortunately, it was the 10% crap which was really important.
Didn't Billy Nick say that if he could pass, he'd be a world-class player? It always makes me think, if you weren't dead, you could breathe. I mean, I don't know, just kind of.
When I Steve Perryman earlier today and said, well, going to talk about your mate John Pratt, he did mention that Bill Nick quote, and I can absolutely, I mean, it's spot on, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the other thing about John Pratt is that he actually had a lot of guts, because even when he was bad, he'd just keep going. I mean, a lot of players.
Yes.
He wasn't frightened of looking crap.
Yeah, he was persistent. I mean, Alan, I think I'm probably right in saying you and I were sitting next to or near each other in John Pratt's prime that Tuesday. Do you remember?
So
what are your recollections of John, and who go on?
Okay, we're going to say John. My dad, you mentioned my dad before, and I went to football for years with my dad, who, once he finally stopped working on a Saturday, and he took great pleasure in calling John Pratt a Pratt, you Pratt, as an unfortunate name. I think he had two problems. One, he was just after the double team and was replacing, the likes of Dave Mackay and Danny Barker, that sort of thing. And he always wanted the ball. As bad as he was, he always wanted the ball. And we've all watched enough players, I won't name names, who disappear. They don't want the ball and they disappear. Anyway, getting on to my choice, I think it's a tough, is that an oxymoron, favourite crap player?
No.
If they're crap, they're not my favourites. I've always, as I said before, I want everybody to be brilliant, and they very often aren't, but we've been. So the player I've sort of written down and sort of just come up with, who I thought would have been a terrific player and didn't, one of many, was Sergei Rebrov, who I thought was a very good player, probably at the wrong place in the wrong time. I think he had injury problems, and then when Glenn Hoddle took over as manager, he obviously didn't rate him, and he bought Teddy Sheringham. And I remember saying, possibly to you, I don't know if that was our era, I can't remember. Then Rebrov's finished, because they're very similar players. They were sort of a deep-lying number 10 come 9, or Harry Kane, a sort of amalgam of numbers. So I think for a favourite, he wasn't a bad player. I liked him a lot, and I was very he's one of those players I was very disappointed didn't make it, because I think he was terrific.
We went many years of buying very good players and doing something to them that just removed all their spirit. And I think Rebrov was definitely one of the big. I thought he was a great player, and it was so frustrating. It felt like we did something to him. I don't know whether that's fair. I don't know what was going on for him at that time.
We were waiting for him to explode, weren't we? And it was like him and Shevchenko, and they're both as good as each other. And of course, we didn't realise they were very different players. And I don't know if we were just expecting something from him that he didn't have. Yeah. And at the same time, as you say, Kev, maybe we did something to him that rendered him slightly useless. My favourite useless player was of recent times is Emerson Royal, because I hated him not in a sort of, I never get vitriolic and I never get nasty, or I never say get him out the team, but he was the one player I thought, what's he doing in the team? He thinks he's better than he is. That's his biggest problem. And he's still trying back heels when he can't even pass it 5 yards. But to his eternal credit, he really improved, and he became a particularly good defender. And I just thought, good on him, because he's a limited footballer, and he's found his thing. He's found the thing that works for him, and I really admired that. I was pleased to see him go, don't get me wrong. But Emerson Royal, there we are. So he was my favourite useless footballer of recent times. Look, I tell you what, we do need to move on. Sorry, Julie, I know you want to come in with another useless footballer, but, we could do a 25 hours on useless Spurs footballers. So I want to just move on a little bit, because we talked about Xavi. Is it Xavi or Xavi?
Xavi.
Oh, God. Okay.
No, Xavi. Xavi is or Xavi.
Oh, well, whatever it is, that's something. I'm conscious of the fact that my two male colleagues on today's show possibly might be reluctant to chat about someone's hairstyle and be critical of it. So I'm going to pass this on to Julie. Alice bands, what do we think?
Yes, I mean, Xavi wears an Alice band. It's not a headband. It's Terry Butcher wore a headband a lot of the time. If you remember Terry Butcher, England player, Ipswich, whatever. Yeah. And part of that was because, it was always useful to mop up the blood, which would always be streaming from his scalp because somebody had nutted him or he had nutted someone. Xavi has got this poncy little Alice band, the kind of thing that... In the days of Princess Di and Sloane Rangers, all Sloane Ranger girls had these poncy little Alice bands, with their sort of Sloane Ranger hairstyle behind it. And I thought, is he insane? What does he think he looks like? I mean, the game's gone. Don't you think? Players wearing...
Well, I can't comment on Alice bands because I don't know anything about style or modernity or, contemporary kind of looks. It means nothing to me. As I've had the same hairstyle for the last probably 35 years. So, Kev, although probably less qualified than me even, is this a hairstyle that drives you mad, or are you happy to let him get on with it?
I tried it myself last year for a couple of months, but it isn't. I think if you look at sort of videos of him, because one of the things I hadn't understood was what a sort of mega Insta influencer brand he's been since about the age of 2. And it looks like he's always had that haircut. And you just sort of think, surely some stylist, and he must employ stylists, I'm sure, even from the age of 2, would have said to him, no, don't do that. It doesn't work. But yeah. So no, I don't. Julie, I don't like it, but I don't really like anyone. Yeah.
Dear, I'm in trouble.
I was gonna say, I think there's 4 people on this podcast all over the age of 21, and I think we have to realise that the style we see is not what is on the streets. This is street style. I'm sure there are thousands, if not millions, of people copying his hairstyle. It is all about branding. We're all, 3 old blokes and a lovely younger woman, and it's style. It's style, and we don't know anything about it. I've got 5 granddaughters. They're all wearing stuff that I don't understand. That's life, and it doesn't. But I know it's bothering Julie. I don't give a monkeys. Where were they? I just wanted to play brilliantly.
Yeah, you made a good point about branding, of course. As I recall, going back, sorry, we're in a different sport here, but Andre Agassi, who lost his hair much long before people knew he'd lost his hair, and he had to wear a wig under his cap to satisfy his sponsors, because that long blonde mane of his was his kind of his selling point. Julie, you're desperate to get a word in on Alice Bands or something else. I'm not sure.
Because I've turned into my mum now. I like that. And I like that Mickey Van der Ven's hairstyle. That's what a man's haircut ought to, not short back.
Short back and sides. Yeah. It's what my mum would call a sensible haircut. All right. Well, look, let's move on a little bit from hairstyles. Alan, I know you wanted to talk about the players that we didn't sign, or we did sign and didn't want.
Yes. Well, it's funny, as I said to you, I'm the eternal optimist. I think we're going to win everything every year, apart from the 2 games against Woolwich Wanderers that I always think we're going to lose. I once went to the 2K for the weekend to miss a televised game against them, and switched on the telly, and Darren Anderson scored, and we were 1 up, but we lost. Anyway, so all the players we signed, and I was going through a list of trying to remind me of myself of players that weren't very good, that I don't think we should have signed. And there were people like Andy Booth, Gregory Raziak, Ryan Nelson, Stefan Dalmat, Vlad Chiriches. But of all the players we've signed, and I've been going to football, to Spurs, as long as Julie, it's now, it's so long I get scared. But there's only one player that I can think of that I disliked with vehemence, and that was Ben Thatcher, who we signed from Wimbledon, who I thought was so not I'm a great believer in Spurs-like players. And I think it's one of the reasons that we've signed these players and we haven't won as much as we should have done. I've seen great success. Julie's seen great success. The other 2, slightly younger, have seen less success. But I just thought Ben Thatcher, who was a horrendous player, and as you know, whenever who he went to afterwards, nearly killed Pedro Mendes on the touchline.
Yeah.
So he's of all those players. I remember Raziak was a terrible player, but I didn't dislike him. But I really disliked Ben Thatcher.
Kev, who would be your favourite bête noire?
God, there's so many, and I've been trying to think of his name. Guy we bought from Norwich. We played him at centre forward. He was terrible player, but I can't think of his name.
Doherty, Gary Doherty or Doherty, depends how.
Was he ginger? He was ginger. The person I'm thinking.
Yeah, ginger. He was. Yeah, his song was the Ginger Pele. Was his.
That's right.
Yeah.
He was a centre half, really, wasn't he?
He was a centre half. Yeah.
Was he?
Yeah.
He was a centre half, and it was that period where we had no strikers at all.
Yeah.
And they stuck him up front. I think, if I remember, in the semi-final.
He scored
a semi-final
against Arsenal.
Yep. And then we lost.
We lost 2-1, of course, inevitably. Yeah. So we've talked about the thug Thatcher. We've talked about, all sorts of players. So have you got somebody you never took to, we shouldn't have bought, didn't do anything for us?
I'm such a softie, as soon as a player signs at Spurs. Ben Thatcher, great. Jason Gozelle, fantastic. No, there's never been a player I've, disliked vehemently. As soon as they're Spurs, they're mine. They're mine for life.
You take ownership. I mean, actually, Giselle's an interesting one because he looked like a footballer, but he was a footballer who couldn't play football. That was my feeling. He was 2-footed. He was very elegant. I thought he's Hoddle minus Hoddle, right? That's what he is. Anyway, moving on. Kev, I know you want to raise a subject with us here today. Mohamed Kudus against West Ham. They booed him incessantly until up to the point where they all left the stadium after about 53 minutes. And then they left him alone. The remainder, booing. It's pathetic. It's puerile, isn't it?
It is. It's more, I think, I've been thinking about this. I had a long discussion with my daughter yesterday about this very subject. And I think it baffles me more than dislike. I have never booed because I feel very self-conscious. I don't think it's that I don't feel the urge to boo. It's just that it's not a natural, spontaneous thing that people do. It's an odd thing that you do in a crowd, I think. And it just, I've never felt comfortable doing it. And one of the things that struck me about the West Ham fans with Kudus was, I'm guessing, I don't know, I can't prove this, that the same fans were doing it every single time he got the ball. And wouldn't you get bored? I would. Well, like I say, I don't do it at all. But every single time booing him, it would clearly not having any negative impact on him at all. I think he was quite enjoying it. It's just, I just find it baffling, really. It's one of those things that I don't understand.
I absolutely detest booing our own players. I mean, that just makes me feel sick to the pit of my stomach, and it's happened probably more often than it should. I mean, there are players, I mean, you think, oh, Christ, he really deserves a bit of a rocket here. But doing that to your own player, no, that should never happen. I've never booed either. It's just utterly pointless and infantile. But and we were talking about this, weren't we, during the match? And we were exchanging WhatsApp. I think if you're Kudus, you're thinking, great, they're booing me. That's inspiring. I want to show them, what I'm about. Julia, you're far too ladylike to even consider booing anybody. But who have you felt like booing?
Again, not me. I just accept the blows, really. The early goal, the player is not doing anything, the bloke who doesn't run back, all those cock-ups and things like that. I feel as though it's somehow my fault. I shouldn't have come to the match. Then it would have been fantastic.
Look, I tell you what, we're coming towards the end of the podcast today. Now, we've got 2 matches coming up before we convene again on Nice One Cyril. So, Kev, in the spirit of giving you another hospital pass, as I did last week, tell us all about Villarreal and what we should be looking out for, how they're doing at the moment, the best players. Yeah. Give us a quick rundown.
The people that most in football who most intimidate me are those people who know everything about European teams. I envy them, but slightly hold them in some contempt, really. I know nothing at all about Villarreal. I've heard of them. They've had some success in Europe, some success in Spain. So I don't know. I think we're going to win, but that's it.
Okay, well, look, good. That's a pretty good summation of kind of fresh air, as it were. I saw Villarreal play Real Madrid in the what's the Real Madrid stadium called? Not the Maracana. What's it called? Julie, Real Madrid.
Bernabeu.
I went to the Bernabeu with my daughter who was living in Spain at the time. We saw Villarreal. That's as much as I know. That was in 2015. I know Ronaldo scored. Alan, you're the know-all. Come on.
I know nothing. Because I don't watch it. People always laugh. I don't actually watch a lot of football. I watch Spurs. I don't watch a lot of football. I have other things in my life. But I read today that they play in yellow, so they're known as the Yellow Submarine, and that is their big song. That Juan Foyth, who used to play for us and plays for them, they've got a couple of ex-Woolwich Wanderer players, Partey and somebody else. Uh-huh. And Manos Solomon is on loan with them and can play under the UEFA rules. Apart from that, I know nothing.
Well, listen, that was better than Kev, with all due respect, Kev. Julie, can you add anything to this?
Yeah.
It's kind of encyclopedia of blank pages.
I don't have Alan's encyclopedic knowledge, obviously, but Manos Solomon. I mean, we all know what's going to happen, don't we?
Yeah. Bit like when Marcus Edwards came back and scored against us a couple of seasons ago for Sporting. Yeah. Inevitable. Absolutely inevitable.
Julie, was it the late Brian Glanville that used to call it the immutable law of the X? And we don't talk about Brian Glanville. We don't talk about Brian Glanville. I forgot in the other pod you mentioned Brian Glanville. I apologise. I'd forgotten that you mentioned him. Anyway, well, it's the immutable law of the X. But
moving swiftly on from that faux pas, let's quickly talk about Brighton. We've got Brighton at the weekend. Thoughts about that, Julie? Because they're a very difficult team to predict, aren't they? Sometimes they turn up, and other times they look absolutely West Hamish. What are your thoughts on that game?
They've got our number. I mean, the traumatic memories of playing games against Brighton. The last time that Brighton came to White Hart Lane, for instance, just could it only have been last May? What happened? There was the being 2-0 up at half-time and the away leg, so to speak, which suddenly became 3-2. And
Bogey team for us.
Sorry, say again.
A bogey team.
Yeah. But they just, I think a bogey team is probably the cliche that I'm searching for.
Okay. Well, look, I tell you what, Alan, you know your way around Brighton and
I do. So as do you.
I do. I'm
Yeah.
quite an attachment to Brighton, but not the team.
No.
I tell you what, let's do this. Let's do the Villarreal. Is it Villa or Villa? Who cares?
Villa.
It's one of those. We're going to do predictions. So let's start, Julie. A Villarreal tomorrow night. This will sound a bit redundant if you're listening to this on Wednesday or beyond. But what are we going to beat them by?
I've mentioned my inability to make proper predictions before. I mean, I always say that we're going to do them 4-1. And, it ends up they beat us 1-0. So I'm really going to go for something safe. I'm going to say 1-1.
Okay, 1-1. And Brighton?
Oh, that's going to be terrible. I just, it's going to be another Bournemouth. Just don't ask me. Don't ask me. I'm
okay,
saying...
all right. Well, I wish I hadn't now after all that. Kev, let's have a look at your thoughts on that team you know everything about, Villarreal, or what's the score going to be?
I mean, given that, I mean, I feel I'm going to make a more informed prediction than everyone else, really, given my knowledge of Villarreal.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm going to 2-1 to us.
2-1, okay. And we don't care about away goals. It's a league basis now, so we'll win. It doesn't matter how it comes. A win is a win. Alan.
Okay, I've got a rule that I've always stuck to, and I'm going to stick to it now, because I think scores are impossible to predict. So I'm not going to predict a score. And I'm going to be the eternal optimist and say we're going to win both games.
I like that. I like that positivity. I mean, I'm pretty sure I said 3-0 to us against West Ham last week, but I can't be bothered to listen back to what the rubbish I was talking last week on the pod. So I'll just say I did, and we'll just leave it at that. I think we're going to beat Villarreal, whoever the hell they are. We're going to beat them, and it might be tighter than we think, or we would hope, perhaps. And we've got Brighton. Yeah, I share that kind of that dread about Brighton, because we've struggled with them. I'll go with the draw. I'll go with 1-1. Let's not get over optimistic about the thing. We'll probably beat them 5 or 6. Who knows? Well, of course, there is the other issue with Thomas Frank, which is that he hasn't had any sort of serious European experience. So we don't really know. I don't see why that should be any different. I mean, I'm sure he does the same homework and gets all the same stats and all the same info. So there's no reason why he shouldn't prepare for that as he would any other game.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. He doesn't have experience in that. I think he's a very good manager. Listen, I was a big Ange fan, so with Australian in-laws, it was a great coming of the right sort of person at the right time. As the jury's out, the jury's not out. We shall see.
Well, I'm guessing that Thomas Frank appeals to the Danish members of your family.
I do have believe it or not, I do have a Danish member.
Of course you do.
Too. But I don't have any Italian or Portuguese, which is why the 2 managers before
that explains the failure of Conte and Mourinho. Well, there we are. Look, we've covered everything. We've covered absolutely everything today on Nice One Cyril. So my thanks go to Alan Fitter. Excellent debut. I think we could. Well, last week we had Dave on, didn't we? And I gave him 7 out of 100. I'm going to give you. What do we think, Julie? What should we give? 9 out of 100 or?
False 9, 9.5.
False 9. I like it. Kev, what are we thinking for Alan? Sorry, Alan, we have to do this. It's embarrassing. Yeah. 8. I know Dave is listening, so that's embarrassing, isn't it? Because I'd like to get him back on. All right. Well, look, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Alan. Hope you've enjoyed Nice One Cyril this week. Enjoy the matches against Villarreal and Brighton, and we'll see you next week. Thanks very much for joining us. Come on, you Spurs.